All right, so first of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, and I'm excited and happy to be part of the Nexus User Conference here in June. And my topic today is putting the sec in DevSecOps. And, Derek, you briefly touched on kind of who am I? And I'm old. I've been around a while. If you're old and been around a while, you get to do a lot of things. But I am the CEO founder of MediaOps, and as well as the co-founder of the DevOps Institute. And MediaOps is the company behind brands like DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, DevOps TV, DevOps Chat, and now also Digital Anarchist, which is our forthcoming video platform. And I should also mention that the DevOps Institute at this point is probably the leading provider of DevOps-based training and certification. Well, we don't provide training, we provide the curriculum. But we've probably had more people certified under DevOps Institute approved classes than anyone in the world. I know it's over 10,000 at this point. So really proud of that as well. But prior to MediaOps, Derek, as you mentioned, I have been lucky enough to co-found or help start up a number of venture-backed startups. Some of them were great successes that went IPO and everything and had liquidity events, and some weren't. I put 3 of them down here just to give you an idea. Doing this kind of stuff for 30 years, 20 of it in IT, and we didn't call it cybersecurity. We called it InfoSec then. But that being said, it affords me a unique, my current position affords me really a unique cat perch to observe what's going on in the industry. I spend most of my day speaking to practitioners and organizations and vendors who are, hip deep up to their elbows in DevSecOps. And for those of you who kind of discount what the marketing people or the vendors say, let me just give you a quick word of caution. Who better knows the entire market and the pain points of their customers than vendors? As a practitioner, you deal in 1 or 2 organizational or situations within organizations. When you're a vendor or an analyst, someone like me, you're getting to see it across a broad range of organizations and situations. So pay attention to what those vendors say as well. They're not all just trying to sell you something. Anyway, let me jump into putting in the sec in DevSecOps here. And it started a long time ago. Well, on the first day God created DevOps. It really wasn't God that created DevOps. But about, I don't know, it's got to be maybe 10 years ago now. I think it was the first DevOps days in Ghent, and the kind of founding cabal, if you will, of the DevOps movement. Patrick and John Willis was there, Damon Edwards, some others. And originally it was DevOps. You didn't have a security in there, you didn't have testing, you didn't have a lot of things. It was really meant to have dev work more closely with ops. And that's what it was about, trying to knock down those silos between dev and ops. And a lot of people, though there was no manifesto or anything, concrete that you could point to like you have in the Agile movement of exactly what DevOps was, there were a lot of people who were very orthodox and said, it's just about dev and ops. It's not about security. It's not about testing. It's not about anything else other than dev and ops. And of course, this kind of was, though it represented an orthodox approach to DevOps being about dev and ops, no duh, it was also excluding people. And that's kind of against the whole cultural, the whole cultural theme of DevOps, which is inclusive, not exclusive. So, rather within the, and I should also add, this was the whole reason I was attracted to DevOps, is I thought it was an amazing way to give security another bite at the apple, to give us a chance to correct some of the mistakes we had inherited and made over the last 20, 25 years and do it better. It was a struggle. It was a struggle getting the dev and the ops and the DevOps crowd to even want to include security. Because, like in so much of IT, security sort of is the redheaded stepchild, or doesn't really have a seat at the table. Other people took a slightly different approach, though, and that was that, look, DevOps is a broad term. Yes, it's about dev and ops, but it encompasses security within there. It encompasses testing within there. It's that whole software development lifecycle, CI/CD, feedback loops, iterations, iterate, reiterate, automation. And so they said there was no need to really have something called DevSecOps, that DevOps itself incorporated sec as well. And, and that got pushed back from the security crowd who quite frankly, and Derek, you were there, Mark Miller was there with me. We've been doing DevSecOps events at the RSA conference in San Francisco for going on 5 years now. And I will tell you, we didn't always get a warm reception from the security folks at RSA because they felt, devs weren't really interested in security, that the whole DevOps thing wasn't inclusive enough for security, that until security was in the name, it wasn't really going to be really security. And so they fought really hard for that, DevSecOps. At the same time, the DevOps folks were pushing back, as I said earlier, about being dev and ops. But a funny thing happened, and Derek, you don't know this, or you may not realize it, but it was, for me, a really pivotal moment in the DevSecOps movement. And that was about, I'm going to say it was probably 4 years ago. You had just released some results from, it was one of the early Nexus community surveys you had done. And what to me was just phenomenal was it said something like almost half of the developers said that security was at least partially their responsibility. And to me, that was a game changer, right? Because for so long, folks in security said, these developers and these ops folks, they don't give a hoot about security. They don't care about security, right? That's why we have to do security and we can't trust it to anyone else. Well, to me, that survey right there, Derek, was the first inkling of, that's not the way it is. No one raises their hand and says, I want to develop insecure software, or I want to put, bad code out on the internet. And people, the game was changing. And since that time, we saw every year a steady, gradual shift in the composition of our audience at the RSA event, as well as DevSecOps events around the world, as well as, frankly, Derek, and some of your evangelizing and what you guys are doing with the Nexus community and Sonatype in general. We saw two things. It wasn't just Muhammad coming to the mountain or the mountain coming to Muhammad. We saw the DevOps crowd recognizing how important security was and that they needed to embrace and bring security into the DevOps family and into the software development lifecycle rather than as a bolted on afterthought. And we saw the security folks recognizing that, for the first time maybe in their professional careers, they were wanted. They were going to be part of a team. They weren't going to be, quote unquote, other and outside of that. And so, if God created DevOps, I say humans created DevSecOps. And some of those humans, I think we should, call out here. Some of them may have spoken at this event or other, all-day DevOps events and so forth. But certainly Shannon Leeds, who started the DevSecOps.org movement. James Wickett, is the founder of Rugged DevOps and kind of a predecessor to what we call DevSecOps today. Ernest Mueller, one of his compatriots down in Austin, is another progenitor of this. And Derek, not to make you blush, but you and Mark kind of evangelizing around the world, doing things with all-day DevOps, and I've been with you at a lot of them. It's really made a difference in making DevSecOps acceptable and knowable to both the DevOps crowd and the security crowd, and making it one tribe, right? There was a time where we really thought of this as two tribes or three tribes, and now it's one tribe. So, I think we've come a long way with DevSecOps. But, just an interesting side note, I only did this PowerPoint in the last 2 or 3 days. And I just did a Google search on DevSecOps, and I did images. And as you can see here, there's no lack of silly diagrams. Well, they're not so silly, but there's no lack of different diagrams trying to explain what DevSecOps is and what it does. And I would put forth the proposition that any time you have so many different ways of trying to define this or show this, it's because no one of them are doing it very, very well. And I think that, unfortunately, was the case with DevSecOps, certainly in the last 2 years. Not to say that tremendous progress wasn't made. The idea of shifting security left, right, and what that means, getting it further to the left of that software development life cycle. The idea of building automated testing of security. Again, shifting that left too, but building it in to the whole CI/CD process has been great. The idea of attaching security people to dev teams and to DevOps teams, at one time was rather radical, is now really commonplace. And even though we have a Tower of Babel situation when we look at all of these diagrams and methodologies and what have you, there is a consistency here, and it's not that they're all based on the infinity symbol either. There is some patterns of consistency of what we see when we talk about DevSecOps. I think the fallacy, though, or the problem in speaking to many, many folks is that DevSecOps itself is such a broad area, right? To say, God bless people like DJ Schleen, for instance, who's a real, true, living, breathing DevSecOps expert. But the amount of areas and places you have to play in to look at the whole DevSecOps lifecycle, if you will, it was just really hard to get your head around. And so I think what we saw was a lot of people begin to realize, hey man, this DevSecOps stuff is real and it works, but we've got to pick our spots. We can't just say DevSecOps and try to be everything to everyone. So at some level, DevSecOps has become a victim of its own success. And, so maybe 18 months ago, we were ready to declare victory. I remember, Mark and I, after one of the RSAs, not this year, the year before, I think we were near 1,000 people there. And we said to ourselves, wow, we've seen it happen, we're ready, the grand unification theories come to pass and DevSecOps is real. And I think what we have found since then is, yes, it is real, but it's not monolithic and it's not end-to-end. There is an end-to-end DevSecOps, but we don't have sort of one tool, one vendor, one best practice, or one process that works across all of these. So back to the drawing board a little bit, not to give up the gains we've made and not to be too much of a downer, but I think what we've seen in the last year or so is a second evolution within DevSecOps. And I'm calling it here the Sec Strikes Back, right? And so what we've seen is the rise of, and no, it's not Skywalker, for those of you who recognize the clip here and where it comes from. But we've seen we've seen the monolith break down, right? Kind of like the hammer in the 1984 commercial breaking down the monolith. We've seen DevSecOps kind of become specialized. So we've seen the rise of what I'm calling devs, not I, but I call it DevSec, and I'll explain more about what that is in a second. We've also seen corresponding to DevSec, SecOps, right? So security working more with the ops side of DevOps, if you will, and for those organizations not DevOps, quite DevOps enabled yet, the ops folks. So DevSec, SecOps. And then I think one of the biggest things that we've seen is the rise of cloud native security. And we're going to jump more into that in a slide or two as well. But let me also say, because this is the Nexus conference and because open source is such a real part of that, that for me, and this was a revelation eureka moment I had in Barcelona at KubeCon, at Cloud Native Con, a couple of weeks ago, that the buzz, excitement, and energy of that community is phenomenal, right? It's like nothing I've seen maybe since AWS reInvent 5 years ago, right? You could feel it. It's palpable. But what's driving it is not necessarily Kubernetes. It may not even necessarily be cloud native. What's really driving that community and that movement is open source, right? Open source is the engine that's pulling cloud native. Open source is the engine is the locomotive, if you will, that is driving all of this fantastic energy we're seeing around app dev. And it's also driving security, new ways of looking at security, building security into service meshes and stuff. We'll get into it in a second. Let me first jump into DevSec. So what do we mean by DevSec? And I got to be honest with you, a quick plug for DevOps.com. When I was looking for images to put in the background here, when I did my Google search for some of these terms, I was surprised to see how many of the images actually come from DevOps.com. We do our featured images. So the backgrounds are all DevOps.com images from articles that we've run over the years. But, what's driving DevSec? So to me, these are our catalysts for the improvement of DevSec. Number one, it's what I mentioned before in that early Nexus community survey that Derek did 3 or 4 years ago. And that is that absolutely developers want to develop secure code and secure applications. Number two, there are still security people who may deny this, but developers and ops and the rest of the organization as well, they absolutely think security is important, and they're not just paying lip service to it. Equally as important, though, for my security folks out there to understand is that these developers don't come from a CISSP or traditional InfoSec, CyberSec background. They don't know, they may not know the CIA, if you will, of security and how it corresponds. They may not be familiar with all the compliance rules and regulations that our security folks are. But so they don't understand many of the traditional security tools and processes, right? Giving them a great vulnerability scanner or a Metasploit or a fuzzer or something like that and telling them have at it, it's you might as well give your child a car and a bottle of whiskey, right? It's just not going to work. We needed, and we're seeing this now, we need to develop tools, processes that are made for developers. And it's a tricky equation here. They have to be made for developers to use, but still powerful and give insight enough for the security teams to trust, because that's what this really comes down to, right? Security folks, in order to give up responsibility and allow developers to to do some of this security testing and go forward have to have the ability to have insight into what code is being put forth and what test it has and what those results are. So it's double-edged. We need tools that developers can understand and use easily, but that also give the security folks the insight and responsibility that they require, right, in order to kind of seed control a little bit here. So, and we're seeing this, by the way, I think we're seeing it with the Sonatype folks. We're seeing it with a lot of the security vendors who are playing within the DevSec space. They're developing security tools to be used by developers and security teams. And that's a great thing. So that's DevSec, and this is part of that shifting left. So we're seeing these tools also be automated. So as code is checked into a repository, it's automatically tested. It could be automatically remediated. We're seeing automated testing, for quality, which should be synonymous with security, across the whole CI/CD process. And this is a great thing. Let's not piddle around about it. It's a great thing. It could get better. We need more of those tools. And we also need to help train those developers better on these tools and what they should be looking for. And not just the tools, but the processes, the best practices, the gotchas on the regulations and so forth. At the same time, we're seeing the DevSec kind of market and scene explode. We're seeing a similar thing in SecOps. Right? The biggest thing that I'm seeing in SecOps, though, is the move from what we used to call APM to AI Ops, right? So when we're talking about application performance monitoring, it wasn't just performance they were monitoring. They were monitoring security and everything else. And now we're seeing organizations, and this includes, by the way, the log monitoring and many of the other solutions in that area. They're all moving towards this notion of AI ops. It's a catchy phrase. Truth be told, I don't know how much of it is truly AI, but that seems to be the name that the industry is putting on it. So you don't hear people talking as much about APM. You do hear them talking about AI ops, and that encompasses a lot of what we're calling SecOps, okay? We're still logging everything. The issue becomes, and we have there are great solutions out there, from Splunk to literally Sumo to many, many others. The issue becomes is not can we log it, but what should we log? Should we log it just because we can? And that's really a fundamental question we're facing in the DevSecOps industry right now in terms of SecOps. Just because we can log it, should we log it? Storage is cheap. No one's denying it. But there comes a point where, do we really need to log everything that we possibly can? And if we do, then how can we build systems that separate the wheat from the chaff, that separate what we do need to analyze and what we do need to analyze regularly versus what we may need to analyze on a one-off basis, and we can store that someplace else. So where does the analysis take place? How much is that analysis, right? How much of the analysis should we do? How much of it is automated based upon, do we do actionable analysis? In other words, once we analyze something and we find something, do we then automate remediation, patching, or, notifications? What road do we take there? Well, obviously there's a lot to do that, but the problem is, well, not the problem, but the reaction of the industry at this point seems to be machine learning, right? I'll take machine learning for 500, please. Everybody is saying, we do AI ops and we do it with machine learning. And what does that really mean? What does it mean for better security? Don't get me wrong. I think this intelligence and machine learning and ability to analyze large data sets can provide us a better level of security. They can spot patterns. When we combine it with threat detection and analysis, we are all safer as a result of it. I just think that we're going through a little bit of a rough patch right now as this technology sort of equalizes in the marketplace, and we build the skill sets and best practices around using this kind of thing. But that being said, I do think that this SecOps is the future of security in the space, right? We're going to be shifting left for DevSec, but we're also at the same time shifting right. And I call it the shift right counterculture. Yes, shifting security left is great, but we need to shift security right too. We've got to worry about security post-deployment. We need to have security built into this AI ops stuff. We need to automate at the size of the data sets we're talking about and the speed of deployments. We need to automate as much of that as possible. Another great thing I've seen in SecOps is this notion of guardrails, right? Where, look, we're gonna put guardrails along the Autobahn, and we're gonna let these cars go as fast as they can drive. We're gonna let these developers develop as fast as they can go. We're gonna let deployments happen as fast as we can. We're gonna let apps fly, but we have guardrails in to make sure they don't run off the road. I think that's another great area for DevSecOps in the next year to 2 years, is developing more and more of these guardrails based on best practices. And rules are meant to be broken. You can deviate if you have to, but putting those guardrails in is the key to really accelerating this to unlimited speeds. Just checking on time. I'm gonna have to go quick here. Cloud native security, really quickly. So look, we've seen the rise of containers and serverless infrastructure and Kubernetes and Istio and part of that service mesh and who knows what's next. I'm going to tell you right now that this is fundamentally changing DevSecOps. It's fundamentally changing DevOps, the microservices revolution. This is the battleground for tomorrow. We need as a community, as an industry, as a group, to get in on this and make sure we're not just taking our old security solutions that we cloud washed originally, but we're using real cloud native type of DevSecOps security solutions and apply them to these new infrastructures that, the rate of adoptions of them are crazy. So I don't want to end on a bummer though, or I think we've made tremendous progress, and it's an exciting time to be doing this. It's all good. I think overall, when we look back from 5 years ago to today, we're better today than we were yesterday in terms of security. We're getting better every day. We're learning from past mistakes. And there's one thing my friend Damon Edwards always tells me: it's a process. DevSecOps is a process. It's never going to be finished. It's never going to be perfect. We'll keep getting better every day.